Really useful to help us organize pieces of information. Whenever you have a list of something or you have a lot of related information, it's really helpful to put it all in one place so that you can access it. And so what I would like to do in this lesson is teach you how to use some of the tools that we learned in a previous lesson, loops, in order to work your way through elements in an array. The first loop that we're going to use is the while loop, which you learned in a previous lesson. And I'm going to use a while loop to loop through the elements in an array. And so here I have an array for all of the Avengers: Hulk, Iron Man, Black Widow, Thor, and Captain America. Oh, and yeah, Hawkeye is missing, so I'm going to put Hawkeye in there too. Okay, so I've got all of the Avengers here in my array. And what I'm going to do is write a while loop that loops through the elements in this array. So the first thing I do when I'm writing a while loop is I set a counter variable. And in this case, my counter variable is going to be, I'm going to set it to I, and I am going to set that variable to 0. Then I'm going to write my while loop. And to do that, I write while I is less than Avengers.length. So while I is less than, in this case, 6, console log Avengers I. Okay, now you would think that this is as far as you need to go, but watch what happens when I run this. When I run this, it logs the first element in my Avengers array, and then it gives me a potential infinite loop error. And the reason that it does this is that I am not incrementing or counting up from 0 with my I variable. What I need to do here is I have to increment my I variable within the while loop. So what that will do is every time the while loop runs, I'm going to add 1 to my I variable, I++. So the first time that I go through the while loop, I is 0, and so I console log Avengers 0. The second time I is 1, so console log Avengers 1, which will be Iron Man. Third time it's 2, console log Avengers 2, that's Black Widow, etc. Now, once I becomes greater than or equal to the length of my Avengers array, I'll be pulled out of this array, and it won't run again. So when I run this, you notice it goes through the array and it prints out every element in the array. Now, I can use this to my advantage, and I could actually add information in the printout. So in this case, I want to, let's use a handy string function. This is the toUpperCase string function. What toUpperCase does is it takes a lowercase word and it puts it all in caps. Then I'm going to add the resultant string, which is each element of this array toUpperCase, to another string, is my favorite Avenger. Okay? Now, when I run this, I get the name of the Avenger, all in uppercase, and then I get it concatenated with the string, is my favorite Avenger. Now here's what's kind of cool, okay? I'm going to set a variable for favorite Avenger. And I'm going to say that my favorite Avenger is the Hulk. Because, I'm a professor, and, the Professor Hulk got to have a little bit of his day in the sun in Avengers Endgame. So my favorite Avenger is Professor Hulk. So now while I loop through the Avengers array, I'm going to use an if statement. If Avengers I is equal to favorite Avenger, then I want to console log Avengers I toUpperCase is my favorite Avenger. Otherwise, else, console log, I have an extra space there I don't need. Console log Avengers I dot to uppercase is good too. Okay, and then outside of my if statement, I increment my I variable, which adds 1. Okay, so now watch this. When I run it, it says Hulk is my favorite Avenger. Iron Man, Black Widow, Thor, Captain America is good too. And then if I were to change this to match any other Avenger on my list, like Thor, check it out. Thor is now my favorite Avenger because I used the equality statement that we learned in a previous lesson, right? And the if-else to go through this information, test it, and then apply various things to it. Okay? So now the other thing I wanted to go through in this lesson is a different kind of loop. So while loops are great. While loops are very helpful. But it might be easier for us to kind of compress some of the elements of the while loop into one line. And that's where the for loop comes in. For loops are used in computer programming when you know how many steps your loop has to go, like how many times you have to iterate through something. While loops are usually used when it's kind of open-ended. So like in our Guess My Number game, we used the while loop to check whether or not the user had guessed the computer's number. Now, we didn't know how many times it was going to take for the user to guess the computer's number. But in this case, we know how many Avengers we have to go through in order to work all the way through our list. So a for loop is set up to deal with cases where we know how many things we're going to be going through. And it's set up like this. For var I equals 0, or any starting point in the loop, and we're going to look at that later, I is less than Avengers.length I plus plus. Now notice that there are semicolons in between these, and we've got 3 different parameters for our for loop. First, we have our starting point. We want to start at with I equal to 0. Basically what this is it's the same as our counter variable up here in our while loop. Okay? Then we want to go through the array all the way through Avengers.length, all the way through to the end of the array. Basically what this is the same as the condition of our while loop. And then we're going to increment. We're going to go plus 1 each time. And that's the same as our counter variable. So what we've done here is we've taken 3 different lines of code, right? Our counter variable initialization, the condition for our while loop, and the increment, and we've put it all into one parameter. Then, sorry about that. Inside this for loop, we use the curly brackets to make it into a block. We're going to console log Avengers I dot to uppercase plus is awesome. Okay, and we can do all of the things that we did here in the while loop. In fact, in order to see this in action, let's just take the stuff we have in the while loop. I'm just going to pull it out. I'm going to put it in here. We're going to get rid of our counter variable because we don't need that anymore. And then we're going to get rid of the while loop and use the for loop instead. Okay, so now when I run this, check that out. It's run through the loop just like it did with the for loop. Now watch this. We can play with some of these values in order to change how this loop runs. So let's say that instead of starting from the beginning, I want to start 2 elements into this array. So instead of starting at 0, I'm going to start at 2. So I'm going to cut off the first 2 elements, and I'm going to start with the second index. Remember, it's 0, 1, 2, Black Widow. Now I'm going to go all the way to the end of the array, and then I'm going to increment by 1. Notice Black Widow, Thor, Captain America, Hawkeye. Okay? I can also start at the end of the array. So I can say, I'm going to go Avengers.length is my I. I'm going to say I is greater than or equal to 0. I minus minus. And I'm going to decrement through. Now watch this. Oops, I have a problem. I don't want I to be equal to 0. Oh, no, the problem is actually I made a mistake over here in my I variable, because Avengers.length is actually 6. It evaluates as 6 because there's 6 elements in here. But what I really want is to start at element 5. And so I need to do Avengers.length minus 1. I is greater than or equal to 0. I minus minus. So watch this. Now I start at the end of the array, and then I'm going backwards through the array and getting the elements that I want. So I'm starting at 5, right? I'm going as long as I is greater than or equal to 0, and then I'm decrementing. I'm going minus minus. So I'm going to change this back to 0, and I'm going to go back to I is greater than Avengers.length. Or sorry, I is less than Avengers.length. And instead of doing I++, I want to show you something here. Instead, I'm going to do I plus equals 2. So what this does, this is what's called a unary operator. It's sort of like the plus plus. But instead what this does is it increases I by 2 each time. And so now I'm going to run this. And I get Hulk, Black Widow, and Captain America. I'm doing every other element in this array. And if I wanted Iron Man, Thor, and Hawkeye, I'd start at the first one, first element of the array, go to Avengers.length and increment by 2. Look, I've got Iron Man, Thor, and Hawkeye. So you can mess with these parameters of a for loop quite a bit, and it gives you a lot of flexibility when you're using an array. And you will use these for loops all the time. We're going to learn how to implement these for loops in the next lesson. But for your assignment in this lesson, there's 3 things I want you to do. First, I want you to create an array with at least 5 elements. Then I would like for you to write a while loop that loops through the array and prints out each of the elements. And then write a for loop that loops through the array and prints out each of the elements. Good luck.